Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Jacqueline Porfilio, and I'm a policy advisor to Secretary Raimondo here at the Department of Commerce. In my policy portfolio, I cover both economic development and climate policy, so I'm very excited to talk about the blue economy today. I'll add that Secretary Raimondo is also passionate about the blue economy, especially as the former governor of the Ocean State. From ports and shipping to fisheries to travel and tourism to offshore wind, I could go on and on. The blue economy encompasses so many important industries that we're focused on here at the Department of Commerce. We're going to focus our time this morning on how funding opportunities at EDA can support the blue economy. As many of you know, EDA received $3 billion through the American Rescue Plan, and we've used that funding to launch 6 programs this summer to support communities in building back better. We'll talk today about how those programs can support the blue economy. I want to start by giving you just a quick overview of our agenda for this session. In just a minute, I'll hand it over to our EDA Assistant Secretary and our NOAA Administrator to share their perspectives on the blue economy and these funding opportunities at EDA. Then I'll hand it over to 2 members of the team at EDA to talk in more detail about EDA's American Rescue Plan programs. We'll save 10 minutes at the end to answer any questions we receive through the chat. With that, I want to start by introducing 2 of our leaders here at the Department of Commerce. We have Assistant Secretary Castillo here with us, who leads the Economic Development Administration, or EDA. She's an experienced public administrator who previously served as National Director of the Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency and held senior positions at both the White House and the International Trade Administration. She is also a first-generation American of Dominican descent, and her role as Assistant Secretary is responsible for fulfilling EDA's mission of leading the federal economic development agenda. This includes overseeing the implementation of the $3 billion that I referenced earlier. Thank you so much for being here, Assistant Secretary.
Great to see you, Jacqueline.
I'd also like to introduce Dr. Spinrad, who is the Undersecretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere and the 11th Administrator of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. This is his 3rd time at NOAA, having previously served as NOAA's Chief Scientist under President Obama and as the head of NOAA's Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, National Ocean Service from 2003 to 2010. As NOAA Administrator, Dr. Spinrad is responsible for the strategic direction and oversight of the agency, which includes developing NOAA's portfolio of products and services to address the climate crisis, enhancing environmental sustainability, creating a more just and equitable NOAA workforce, and, very relevant for this conversation, fostering economic development with a focus on the blue economy. Thank you for being here, Dr. Spinrad.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
I'm so glad that we're able to have both principals this morning and so glad that they're part of the team leading the Department of Commerce here. I think this is a great example of cross-bureau collaboration at the Department of Commerce, and the blue economy is clearly a topic that touches multiple missions. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Spinrad to kick off the meat of our discussion today.
Thanks, Jacqueline. And I'm going to start by sharing a question with Assistant Secretary Castillo. So, Assistant Secretary Castillo, as we just heard from Jacqueline, President Biden's American Rescue Plan allocated EDA $3 billion. Can you tell us a little bit about the programs that EDA is running to utilize this historic opportunity to build back better?
So, Dr. Spinrad, it is just incredibly an opportunity to be participating with you this morning, especially as we exemplify the work that the Commerce family does together. So not just what EDA does, but how can EDA and NOAA continue to work together to build an agenda that's supportive of the blue economy. Indeed, the American Rescue Plan provided EDA with a $3 billion funding opportunity. And the way we have structured it and what we're trying to make sure that we underscore is not only making sure that we come out of the pandemic in terms of providing support, but also developing what the arc of the future is like. As was mentioned before, EDA is the only federal government agency with economic development as its sole mission. And it's just to make sure that everyone understands, we are the U.S. Economic Development Administration, known by the acronym EDA. So our funding is really locally driven. in terms of building strategies to improve communities and create jobs. So to your question, exactly, the way that the American Rescue Plan dollars were not only processed, but in terms of the design, was really looking at how can we help communities where they're at, and also making sure that they can uplift their assets and their vision for economic development. So there are 6 different grant opportunities, and I'm going to start out by speaking about the Build Back Better Challenge, which really is a $1 billion investment that invites regional coalitions to apply for 3 to 8 transitional projects that will further their regional economic development. So this is really an opportunity to make a sizable investment, but really fostering regional economic development. So we're looking at how organizations are going to partner together, how they're going to really be able to leverage the assets from both the public, private, nonprofit, philanthropy, universities. So it's an exciting effort. The phase 1 is truly a concept proposal, and that deadline, I have to underscore, is coming quickly, which is October 19th. So what we are already doing is to make sure that we are educating and providing as much information. So there are various recordings on our website. I have already heard about several regions that have really focused on the blue economy in terms of their regional clusters and thinking about how to apply. So it's exciting that the concepts of the blue economy are coming into play. And I certainly encourage this type of proposal and would encourage those applicants to focus on making sure that their vision for economic growth is strong and that they have the right coalition members in their application and the project proposals to support the vision as actionable. Our other big national programs, as if I may, the second one is the Good Jobs Challenge, which allocates $500 million towards industry-led workforce training programs to help get Americans, particularly women and people of color and those in underserved communities, back to work in good-paying jobs. That deadline is January 26th of 2022, but it's also fast approaching. Last, another important large portion of these different grants is our $500 million in economic adjustment assistance. These grants will help hundreds of communities across the nation plan, build, innovate, and put people back to work through projects tailored to meet local needs. These tend to be one-off programs that really help a community unlock its economic potential, unlike the suite of projects that communities would submit to the Build Back Better region. So really the economic adjustment assistance is a much more flexible pool of dollars, but equally as important and essential. So as you can see, EDA has a lot of great opportunities to support communities who have blue economy clusters. Our program teams, especially those in regional offices, can help support you think through the right program. So again, I just want to make sure that our audience understands that at Commerce, we collaborate with our sister agency, and this is really a great opportunity to highlight not just what EDA does, but also what NOAA is doing. So I'm going to turn the tables, Dr. Spinrad, and ask you a question as well. And one of the exciting things about EDA is our funding flexibility. It allows us to meet communities where they are and support them in ways that is most meaningful locally. Whether that means supporting the blue economy, AI, agriculture, or more. So here's the question I want to ask you. Can you tell us, in your words, what the blue economy truly means, just to make sure that we dispel any myths and also bring some clarity to this conversation?
Thank you for that, Assistant Secretary Trujillo. I think the way you've characterized the great work that's coming through EDA and the opportunities available for our audience here, our audience attendees, and many others will fit nicely with what we're trying to do in NOAA, and especially in the context of this concept of the new blue economy as we're trying to push it forward. I define the new blue economy as a knowledge-based ocean economy. It looks to the ocean for data, information, and knowledge that can be applied to new sustainable business opportunities that are complementary to and supportive of what the traditional blue economy comprises, such as transportation, fisheries, exploration, recreation, aquaculture, tourism, and also offshore wind. So it's a complement to these existing blue economies based on the fact that we now have the capability to make sophisticated and accurate measurements of the ocean and to build predictive models. So it offers opportunities for sustainable, climate smart innovation and economic growth based on sound science. But as a little bit of an aside, just yesterday I had the chance to meet with an entrepreneur who is doing just this and has been able to raise close to $100 million of private investment based on this concept of the new blue economy. It's centrally driven, the new blue economy is by data about the status and trends of the ocean environment. That's in our DNA at NOAA. That's what we are about. So we look to be playing a leading role in the collection and provision of this data to the developer community. Tailored climate information, products, and services based on ocean and climate data are emerging as a major market within the new blue economy. As just one example, let me just focus a little bit on offshore wind. It's a prime example of how the new blue economy offers opportunities for sustainable business development and a place where NOAA can promote economic development while maintaining our role as environmental stewards. If you think about it, the development of offshore wind depends on data, information, and knowledge about the ocean for three specific things. One is the siting. Where are you going to put the offshore wind facilities? Well, you better have good environmental data that tells you this is where you're going to get a lot of wind, this is where you're not going to get a lot of wind. There's also a regulatory role. Obviously, within NOAA, we manage the marine fisheries in a sustainable manner. And again, knowing where to put those facilities is going to depend on careful consideration of impacts or benefits to the marine fisheries. And then the third part where we contribute through this new blue economy is through the operations. Once the facilities are sited, once they're fully licensed and in place, they're going to want the best environmental information to optimize the delivery of energy to the grid. So as you can see, our knowledge of the ocean and marine resources, our observations, and our forecasts are going to play a very important role in achieving the administration's offshore wind goal and very much feed into the EDA objectives, which leads me to a question that I have for you, and that is thinking about the new blue economy as I've just described it. The Build Back Better Regional Challenge seems like a great opportunity for our stakeholders to partner with broader regions to scale the sector and develop resilient economies. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program and what you're most excited about?
Well, it's truly exciting. But I also want to congratulate you because you're absolutely right. The assets that NOAA has, I'm a huge fan of NOAA in so many ways. And you underscored precisely that knowledge-based agency, the data that you all produce is of incredible use, not just to save lives, but also to, as we tackle climate change, as well as the entrepreneurial component. So I wanted to give you a shout out from my perspective because I'm a huge fan of NOAA. But let me go back to your question in terms of the Build Back Better challenge, which is really, it's a moment in time where we are intentionally making sure that not only are we looking for those proposals that are going to be catalytic and transformational, but also looking again, as I said before, regional economic development. So the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, again, is $1 billion of national competition that will ultimately provide a transformational investment to anywhere between 20 to 30 regions across the country that want to revitalize their economies. These regions will have the opportunity to grow new regional industry clusters or scale existing ones through planning, infrastructure, innovation, entrepreneurship, workforce development, access to capital, and much, much more. As I mentioned, the phase 1 deadline is fast approaching, and that's October 19th. Let me just detail what phase 1 is about. Phase 1 is really, will award technical assistance funding of $500,000 to strong applications that include a vision for growth of the region's industry cluster, including 3 to 8 projects that would support that vision. For these phase 1 applications, we are looking for clear vision for economic growth of the regional cluster, the right coalition members are part of that will be part of executing on that vision and have a real convening power to drive change in the region. And that's the project's proposal. We want to make sure that these project proposals are actionable. My colleagues that will be presenting later will give you more details on regarding the context for which this program is all about. It's a new and transformational program for EDA, and one that I know is going to be catalytic for so many different communities. So we're actually working very hard and inviting as many participants as possible, because that's where we're going to really unleash some new vision and some new opportunities for economic development across the country. So I'm just thrilled that we're having this conversation because the moment is right. So Dr. Spinrad, if I may, I know we've discussed how we can partner together, and I think there's some really great opportunities at EDA to support your efforts. How are you partnering with other non-NOAA entities, whether they're federal agencies or bureau, non-governmental organizations, communities, university, to advance the blue economy? What does that partnership look like?
Yeah, thank you for that, Assistant Secretary Trujillo. And I think your question really gets to the heart of how we can do our business. We can't do it all. And so partnerships like the one we're talking about here today with EDA are examples of taking leveraging the strengths of each of our respective participants. So within the Department of Commerce, we see similar kinds of relationships with the Minority Business Development Administration, also with our partners in Census when we're looking to apply a heavy equity lens to the climate products and services. We're also working with the National Institute of Standards and Technology to develop the more techno side of the house, if you will. And even PTO, Patent and Trademark Office, has a role to play within the department. So a lot of intersections, technical, programmatic, policy-wise. When you look outside of the department, we're heavily engaged in any number of White House-led interagency working groups on coastal resilience, on fire weather, on drought, on flooding, and on health, climate and health. And so this is where we're going to develop a whole set of programs. We're doing a number of climate and equity roundtables to reach out to local communities. And I honestly believe that what comes out of those, as we're doing them, in fact, I'll be going up to the Great Lakes at the end of this week to do one. I think this could help to inform EDA's American Rescue Plan, the statewide planning, research, and networks program that we've got to gain and glean information about climate change. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a bit about the Civilian Climate Corps that's under development, led by President Biden's executive order on tackling climate crisis at home and abroad. We're going to look to take advantage of some of the time-tested skills that we've established in NOAA through Sea Grant, through our regional engagement to build this climate corps as well. So the partnerships are broad, wide, deep, and they exist at every level, at agency levels, at local community, state, tribal levels, and of course with our industry partners as well. With that, I'm going to throw it right back to Jacqueline to take us to the next phase on this discussion. But thank you so much. I've really enjoyed having
this was a lot of fun, and I hope we can do it again. Thank you, Dr. Spinrad. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your thoughts, Assistant Secretary Castillo and Dr. Spinrad. That was great. So we're going to turn it over now to two members of the EDA team who are going to go do a deeper dive into the EDA American Rescue Plan programs. So I would like to welcome Scott Andes, who is the program lead for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, and Maria Messick, who is a special advisor at EDA and has been instrumental in the implementation of the $3 billion. So over to you, Scott and Maria.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. I am going to share my screen, but we're going to go into a little bit more of the details on the programs that Alejandra mentioned in her responses back to Dr. Spinrad, and then Scott will give us a little bit more of a flavor on the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, who has our first deadline of October 19th coming up. So one moment as I share my screen. Excellent. Well, thank you all again for joining us. like I said, I'm just going to go into some of the other programs that we have in our American Rescue Plan Act because there are a lot of them. I just wanted to take an opportunity to call out each of them and put it on the screen for people to review. There's more information on each of these programs on our website at eda.gov/ARPA. So please take a look if any of these sound interesting to you. So our first one on this page is our travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation program. So we have $750 million towards helping communities impacted by COVID-related travel and tourism recover in this specific industry. $510 million is for state grants, and we have $240 million set aside for competitive grants. Those competitive grants are on a rolling application cycle. But we do encourage people to get those applications in by March of 2022. The Good Jobs Challenge, as Alejandra highlighted, is our $500 million signature workforce development program aimed at establishing or strengthening regional systems to train workers. This is a really exciting program with its deadline at January 26, 2022. Our economic adjustment assistance is EDA's bread and butter. This specifically helps communities where they're at by funding specific projects, whether it's in infrastructure or technical assistance planning, or even revolving loan programs. And we have $500 million set aside for this. This is also a rolling application window. Our Indigenous Communities Challenge is actually just our EAA program, but specifically dedicates $100 million of this economic adjustment assistance to Indigenous communities. Next, we have our Build Back Better Regional Challenge, which I will not provide too many more details as Scott can take that one for us, but it is a $1 billion signature program. And then lastly, we have statewide planning, research, and networks. Statewide planning grants were provided to states up to $1 million to help them plan their economies for the future, especially in recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. We also have research that can go hand in hand with any of the above challenges to help study it and improve our programs going forward. And lastly, networks are actually communities of practice that will help specifically programs like our Build Back Better Regional Challenge and Good Jobs applicants and awardees get together, talk a little bit more about best practices, and ensure they're progressing in their grants appropriately. So with that, I just want to spend a quick few minutes on EDA's investment priorities, which came out in April, and these are key to all the programs I just mentioned. So equity is our #1 investment priority, and that is focused on ensuring underserved communities or geographies are, sharing the benefits with the grants that we provide, and we encourage all applicants to include how they would incorporate equity into each of their applications. Recovery and resilience actually touches nicely on the climate change discussion we talked about, or Secretary Castillo and Dr. Spinrad talked about regarding NOAA's involvement and EDA's collaboration there. So ensuring recovery and resilience are key parts of applications is important. Workforce development is another key EDA investment priority. Manufacturing, technology-based economic development, environmentally sustainable development, and then exports and foreign direct investments. I'm not going to spend too much time on any of those other topics I just mentioned. You can see them on the page and you can find more details about them at eda.gov/about/investment priorities, and that link is on this presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Scott to take away the rest of the presentation on our Build Back Better Regional Challenge.
Thanks a ton, Maria. I appreciate it. And it's wonderful to be with all of you. Really excited to talk about the Build Back Better Regional Challenge and the $1 billion competition and how the blue economy, I think we believe, squarely fits in the intent of this project. So I'm going to do a couple of things. One, I'll walk through the structure of the competition and give you a little bit of the sense of the intent and how we're thinking about what successful clusters look like and how you might think about it and participating with even just a few weeks to go. So to begin with, this really is seen as an effort to transform 20 to 30 regions around the country. When you look at how regions tend to change over time, it's a 10 to 25 year process. We are trying to do a generation worth of economic development in 5 years. through this program in at least 24 places around the country. And we're doing that. The economic theory through which we are doing that is as Alejandro mentioned, cluster policy. And so think about what a cluster is, and I'll give some examples around the blue economy in a moment, but this is a way of blending and braiding all the different things a regional economy would need to thrive and become even more competitive in the future. So the types of projects that will come together in these proposals look like workforce development, entrepreneurship, planning, really doing sort of economic analysis scans of the potential opportunities, infrastructure projects, and more. Really, we're leaving it open to applicants to tell us what you need to make your blue economy and other clusters thrive. Next slide. Great. So let's talk a little bit further about what does transformational change in some of these distressed communities really look like. Well, we see this in a number of different ways. One, we think, again, the ability to bring together multiple projects across the spectrum to, in a holistic way, address critical gaps in regional economies is unique. It's transformational. It is not something that at least EDA traditionally does, and as a nation, it isn't something we generally do. So we do think that this is a unique way of thinking about local economic development. And if you were to think about applying or partnering with a potential applicant, really understanding that these projects are meant to work together to make sure the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. A second piece of this that I think is really exciting and clearly aligns with missions that are around the blue economy is we see this as regional moonshots. So not only is this meant to address fundamental inclusion and equity goals and create regional economic competitiveness, we think regions through strong clusters can address some of the nation's greatest challenges. And obviously in the blue economy plays a critical role, be it climate, different pieces of environmental justice and other elements. So we see this as a critical opportunity to address some of our most systemic problems as a nation through this challenge. And I hope you see that your role in the work in the blue economy is fitting squarely in that moonshot. And finally, this is a goal to bring together a regional coalition. We are not looking for one entity that can do it all, simply because we don't think there is one entity that can do it all. We are truly looking for partners and the types of organizations that you all work with are critical to this. So this is universities, this is industry, this is workforce trainers and others. Really each component bringing something to the table that, again, makes the whole greater than the sum of the parts. So now let's dig in a little bit on what we mean by clusters, and then we'll talk a little bit about the brass tacks of the challenge. Next slide, Maria. Thanks. So when we talk about sort of what this regional cluster looks like, how do we think about this? So first and foremost, it's incredibly clear important to lay out. We do not have mandated set geographies. This is not a city competition. It is not a county competition. It's not a state competition. Because economic clusters, and as you all know in the blue economy space, they don't naturally translate into traditional sort of political boundaries. So what we really want is for applicants to ask the question, what are the features? What is the footprint of our particular industry? So in the blue economy, of course, it'll require a coastal town, but there often might be an adjacent major city. There might be some interplay with a number of different universities of different shapes and sizes. Obviously, although there's often a relationship with a port, but you can see how when you begin to think whether or not you would be thinking about renewable energies off the coast of Massachusetts or maritime transport at the Port of LA or Long Island or fisheries in the upper Northwest, each of these are going to have a unique regional footprint. And we want these coalitions to really reflect what those regions look like. Next slide. Great. So if we've got this understanding that it's meant to reflect an overall cluster and meant to really think about how we can bring these pieces together. What do the sort of partnerships look like? So one, I'll give you the sort of how the NOFO is laid out, just so it's crystal clear, and then maybe I'll give an example from the blue economy. So there is a lead institution. So the lead institution refers to the entity selected to submit phase one application on behalf of your region. It facilitates cooperation, leads the collaboration across projects among the cluster participants throughout the project. The lead may be an economic development district, it might be a university, it might be a local government or agency or other eligible entity, really is quite open outside of private sector actors and others. Second is the coalition members. So these are the organizations that really are going to be activating the respective projects throughout the process. So we're looking for 3 to 8 projects. Phase one is really meant to identify the team and identify what those projects are meant to accomplish and the goals. And then phase two will be asked the question, how does your coalition partners and how are they actually going to execute over the duration of the following 5 years? And again, the coalition partners can be any eligible entity. This can be higher education, nonprofits, states and local governments, economic development organizations. And then finally, we have partners, and these are a much broader list. They can be philanthropy, labor, industries, and others. And it really crosses the spectrum of who do you need to get the work done. And so maybe I'll just take a brief minute to use, a made-up example or an example of a blue economy space and how one might think about this type of structure. So suppose you were to think about maritime transport and really think about the next generation ports, Port of LA, Port of Long Island. One could consider the port as a major partner, but maybe the city of San Pedro and Los Angeles as the lead institution. UCLA and a group of 22 universities have blue economy research centers around the area. They would be part of the coalition. You then might have an organization that's meant to support startups in that area. And again, all of these come together to sort of produce what might look like as a blue economy cluster that would be eligible for this competition. Again, you could play this out. You all know this space infinitely better than we do. You could play this out in the blue economy around it. Next slide. Great. And so the eligible applications, applicants. So I won't march through this with great detail. But the ones we just mentioned. I think one thing I will just highlight on this point is if you look at the NOFO, this comprehensive economic development strategy, many places have those. Some of them don't. That's okay. What we're looking for is that you have a SIDS equivalent or some sort of demonstration of your alignment with economic development missions in general. Happy to take some questions during the Q&A on that, but essentially there's lots of flexibility to signal you have an economic development plan and you're executing on it. All right, let's talk about the deadlines and the phases and how you might be able to get involved immediately. Okay, so phase one, as Alejandro said, is right around the corner. It's October 19th, and what that will translate into is 50 to 60 regions that receive $500,000 for technical assistance. And let me pause for a second there. I know what many people might be thinking is that's 2 weeks away. What could I possibly do? So one, I want to make clear that the phase one application is 5 pages along with supporting material. And if there is, for many of you, you've already got incredible partnerships, you're doing incredible work on the ground. I wouldn't be surprised if some of your partners in the different blue economy space that you work with through NOAA and otherwise are already looking at this. So one way that you could get involved, I would encourage you to reach out to them and see if they've been thinking about this. Because it may very well be the case you don't need to create an entirely new proposal. You can add value to existing proposals that are being created right now. So that's one suggestion and one potential way to get involved immediately. But once we get through that phase one, we'll begin our phase two process. And this is really about execution, identifying 20 to 30 regions that really have incredible plans partnerships and projects to execute on $25 to up to $100 million in grants over the next 5 years per region. And you know, as Alejandra mentioned, this is, for many of these communities, this is transformational dollars. We not only hope but expect that they will make incredible differences over the duration of this grant and beyond. We're starting all that work in real time. So again, I would really encourage you to reach out to the partners you work with on the ground, see if others are thinking about this, and think about whether or not the coalition that you engage with in your blue economy efforts might be a good fit. And with that, I'll just conclude with one slide and then turn it back over to Maria about how we think about what it takes to come together to bring success. Next slide, Maria. Thanks. So I won't go through everything on the right, but really want to emphasize a couple of elements. So when we think about what is a really compelling proposal and ultimately regional cluster that has the capacity to grow, there are four. Element one is the regional assets. You have genuine strengths in the blue economy and opportunities. Again, it could be underwater autonomous vehicles, it could be renewable energy, it could be fisheries, it could be maritime transport. But is it real? Is it documented? And can you build upon that to create national and international competitiveness? That's sort of area one. Area two is around industry leadership. Are we convinced, and are you convinced, that industry is at the table, they demand and are interested in the proposed projects and outcomes? There's a quote unquote end user in the private sector for the things that we'll be doing through these grants and resources, and there's buy-in, commitment, and excitement to participate in this work. Third, of course, is equity. This is at the core of everything we do at EDA, and what we really want to know is, and when we say equity, we mean equity in a geographic sense, a demographic sense, and a historical distress sense. Are the communities involved representing those who have been left behind in some of recent economic transitions? Are they the individuals and the systems and sectors that have been left behind? And are they core to your strategy? That is an incredibly important piece of everything we look at. And finally, sustainability. And here, when we think about sustainability as economic development organization, we might think about it a little differently. For sustainability, what we really mean here is, can you get the work done, and does it have staying power? Will the organizations, the projects, and the leadership have the ability to see this work live far beyond the duration of this grant? Again, when we think about economic transitions, we think in terms of decades, not years. And so what we really want to know is, will these resources spent over the next 5 years constitute sustainable long-run change that propel regions into the 21st century economy? And with that, let me turn it back over to Maria. Happy to answer any questions during the remaining. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Scott. Just wanted to highlight this page for everyone as people are putting together their applications, whether it's for the blue economy or other regional clusters. EDA has provided a number of different resources on our site, including a program overview, application checklists, a number of useful FAQs that answer some of the questions I've already seen in the chat, optional staffing and budget templates, just to help you get an idea for what level of detail to provide. And then lastly, we provide our webinar overview and slides. Again, a number of you have put in the chat, where can I get a copy of this presentation or webinar recording? We'll be posting that later today or early tomorrow, so you can make sure to get a copy. So just wanted to make sure everyone here was aware of those resources. They're incredibly helpful. Just going into a little bit on next steps to apply. So if you haven't been interested in applying until now, there are a few different ways you can look into the application. So the first thing that we always ask applicants to do is read the notice of funding opportunity and make sure you're eligible. You can look at this for all of the 6 programs I outlined at the top of this presentation. I also recommend you look into your economic development district that also provides planning support and technical assistance for all sorts of applications. And then for this program in particular, please email your questions to buildbackbetter@eda.gov. That inbox can answer some of the more technical application questions as well as policy questions you might be debating back and forth, or you could contact your economic development representative that's local to your state or region, and you can find that information at eda.gov/contact. So with that, I am going to turn us into the Q&A section and take a look at some of the questions that you all have put in the chat that are less logistic related. If you haven't shared a question that's on your mind, please do put it in the chat, and Scott and I will make sure to answer those live for you. So I think one question that was an interesting one was, how do private companies think about getting involved in these clusters? Scott, do you want to take that question?
Sure. While companies can't be the lead applicant on the Build Back Better regional competition, there are many ways that companies can, and indeed we hope as a scoring criteria, we hope they do participate. So one, they can serve as one of the partners within the broader coalition. And by what does that mean? So there can be anything from adding advice and obviously there could be matching components. There could be a number of training centers that a private sector is already pursuing that can align with this effort. Really what we're seeking for in terms of private sector is that, one, you're informing the process such that these projects meet your needs and meet the sector's needs, and two, you're actually have some skin in the game and show that you're, both from your leadership, your employees, and other resources, you're participating in the cluster. Those are just some of a few.
Great. Another question that was in the chat is, could a cluster be a multi-state regional ocean partnership such as MARCO, which I will admit I'm not familiar with that acronym, but I think the top of the question still stands.
Sure, you want me to take that as well?
I can take that. I actually put the response in the chat, and just to voice it over for those who aren't following along, it is possible. However, the cluster needs to present a vision for what that regional economic development would actually look like. And it's really important that whatever that coalition is, such as MARCO, that's looking at applying for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, should include partners on the ground that would actually be executing those projects. Those should be part of the overall coalition that applies to this challenge.
And one thing I'll add on the geography sort of writ large is the Build Back Regional competition is a place-based challenge. And by that it means the investment, while there's no set geography, is meant to constitute the projects as a whole connect with one another, both geographically and programmatically. So, it'd be very difficult for including a 300 square mile cluster is going to be a tough sell. Whereas, we're interested in more, clearly defined regions based on the economics of the cluster.
Great. Another question I see just came in. How will EDA evaluate the value of each? Specifically, what role will environmental sustainability or climate action play in the decision-making process? So I can take this one, at least the second part and the specifics, and maybe throw the first part that's a little bit more general to you, Scott. But environmental sustainability is one of our investment priorities, as I mentioned at the top. And so that's a critical piece of applications. If those projects or clusters take into account those components, they will be more competitive. And specifically in our evaluation criteria, we talk about how projects align with our investment priorities as one of our scoring metrics. And at the top, I think, how will EDA evaluate the value of each coalition? Do you want to just give a general answer to that on our evaluation criteria and how we think about that?
Sure. I think there's a number of different ways, and we talked a little bit about them. But obviously, the coalition has formed due to actual necessities on the ground, not just as a response to the NOFO. That this team has some indication of working well together, and that the elements of the team, both the institutions and the individuals, are the right fit to get the projects done and to do them really, really well. One thing I should say that given the size of these grants, we are very, very interested in whether the teams have the capacity to execute. So that's going to be really important.
Perfect, thank you. One question I saw at the top is, will EDA or another entity act as a connector with small organizations and possible proposal clusters that might benefit from a partnership? I would say the best way to think about this, EDA is not doing this for every single region because we don't have, frankly, the bandwidth within our agency to do that and help facilitate every conversation, but there are two places that I would recommend looking. First, as I mentioned earlier, your economic development district. Those places that are local to where you're thinking about doing a project can really help tie together some of those stakeholders, and EDA tends to fund those economic development districts regularly to help with that sort of technical assistance. Secondly, like I mentioned as well, we have economic development representatives that are on the ground in each of the regions and states and can help answer questions from, maybe it's a smaller organization that wants to get involved in a project and maybe doesn't know what coalitions, are already starting to form. The EDR could certainly help connect you with the right match if you reached out. And like I said, you can find that information at eda.gov/contact to find who the right person of contact would be for you. So another question that came up is, are Sea Grant organizations eligible to be lead applicants? And here I would just say it depends entirely on what organization type the Sea Grant is. If it's a nonprofit, then it would also have to depend on certain of its founding documents. And so that's, again, where I would recommend you to contact the local EDR to get a little bit more detailed in the description of what that organization is. I'm going to shoot over this last question at the top to you, Scott, and then we'll look to wrap up shortly. But will broader clean tech clusters, inclusive of blue economy priorities, but also focused on others, battery development, storage, et cetera, be competitive for this aligned opportunity with NOAA? Or are you looking for blue economy cluster applications more specifically?
Yeah, and just to be completely clear, we are not prescriptive in any way, shape, or form on the nature of the cluster and which segment of the economy it's in. I was using blue economy examples because that's the webinar we're having, but no, we look to receive everything from logistics to advanced manufacturing to clean tech to any other cluster. The components of the cluster, the opportunity for what they can do in the region, and the genuine assets is really the gating criteria. And again, I would say please do look at the notice of funding opportunity. There's 9 scoring criteria. It's clearly in there, and everything you need to know. And you could send questions to the email that Maria has posted as well.
Great, thanks, Scott. And thank you all for clarifying that the Sea Grant is a national and regional program run by NOAA. So like I said, it depends on some of the details of what actually, that organization is, and to determine if it's actually eligible. And Scott had flashed up some of the eligible applicants, and you can find a little bit more detail on our website in the notice of funding opportunity. And like I said, contact your local EDR for a little bit more details and to sort that out. I think we are coming up at time. There's one more question that I'm going to post to you, Scott, from the chat, and then I think we will cut it off. And it ties a little bit to the question you just answered. So, is it within the scope of these funds to initiate a longer-term funding mechanism for the blue economy For example, could funds be in part used for consultation on municipal or state bond strategies specific to the blue economy?
So sustainability of the project is a critical criteria for us. We really want to see the long-term success of these cluster initiatives. So the more applicants can clearly show that the investments made over the next 5 years in the discrete 3 to 8 projects translates into longer term value, the better. So absolutely, we are definitely seeking feasibility applicants that are feasible over time.
Great. Well, I think we're going to wrap up the session. Thank you all so much for your questions in the chat. I apologize if we missed any. There were a lot flying around, but as Scott said, please send any additional questions for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge to buildbackbetter@eda.gov. And then you can also look at our website for any other general art programs. That's eda.gov/ARPA. Thanks so much. Appreciate everyone's time.